Hello, and welcome to this Marketing and Communications Watch. My name is Chiqui Cartagena, and I am the CMO of the Conference Board and the leader of the Marketing and Communications Center. It's my pleasure to welcome Leslie Wood, Chief Research Officer of NC Solutions, and Dr. Jake Benefla, the Executive Director for the Center of Multicultural Science, and also a Senior Fellow here at the Conference Board. Today we will be talking about how shopping behaviors and brand equity have been changing since the COVID-19 pandemic forced the U.S. economy to shut down and what that might mean for the future of grocery brands. But first, let me properly introduce my guest. A pioneer and innovator in advertising analytics with more than 30 years of experience, Leslie Wood is responsible for the overall research function at NC Solutions. This includes shaping the methodologies that keep the firm on the leading edge of the marketing and advertising performance analytics and playing a key role in envisioning the future products. Leslie has a long history with deep involvement in single-source methodologies, including Behavior Scan, Scan America, and Project Apollo. And of course, a professional background that includes such recognized names as ABC Television, Procter & Gamble, as well as her own company, Media Trust, LLC. Dr. Benefla is currently the Executive Director of the Center for Multicultural Science, which is the home of an industry-leading research and data lab and data science accelerator designed to educate, mentor, and place tomorrow's underrepresented multicultural workforce in data science positions in corporate America. Prior to launching the center in 2010, Dr. Benefla spent 15 years as a growth consultant for a number of Fortune 100 companies in the United States. Thank you both for joining us today. Just one quick reminder, and thank you all for tuning in, that this is also offering CPE credit. It's available for this webcast. So if you would like to earn credit, make sure to provide us with your name and your email in the designated box below, and click on the 3 pop-ups that will appear on the screen throughout the program. Cool. So with housekeeping out of the way, let's get to it. NC Solutions has been, let me just forward this slide. NC Solutions has been tracking the shopping behavior of U.S. consumers since the pandemic started. And you have some very interesting findings to share with us today. But before we get started with your research, Leslie, let's ask our audience about how they think shopping behaviors have been affected by the pandemic. So you see right in front of you our first poll question. How long do you think consumers will stick to their new shopping behaviors? 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, until the country has completely reopened, or until a vaccine is available? So while we let the respondents take place, Leslie, I heard Paco Underhill at a podcast that we had last week say that by the age of 40, 80% of shopping preferences are set. Do you think that's true?
No, I don't. I don't think it has. Age is not the key. I think it's life moments. I think there's what would we be in the business of advertising if all your decisions were set? I think who we are evolves and changes. Our taste changes. The products that are available change. The people we live with, whether we have children, and the taste of the people around us. And culture drives an awful lot. I mean, the kinds of things we're interested in are evolving all the time. And we are evolving as human beings. So how could it be set for life at 40?
No. Well, thank God, right?
Yeah, thank goodness.
So I see a whole bunch of results coming in. Let's go ahead and close this poll and share the results. So, very interesting. 38% say that they will stick to their new shopping behaviors until a vaccine is available. Interesting, but not surprising, and that's exactly what you're going to be talking to us about, right, Leslie?
Yeah.
Let's go to the second poll question, please. And as soon as it comes up, I will read it. This current pandemic has impacted my brand loyalty, your brand loyalty, viewers. How? strongly agree, agree, neither agree or disagree, disagree, or strongly disagree. So Jake, have your patterns changed? Has your brand loyalty changed during these past 3 months? Jake, are you there? Okay, Leslie, has yours?
Well, I actually am not doing any of the shopping these days, so it's kind of my husband does all the shopping, and he always has. Although his shopping behavior has changed. He's both buying new things. We had a spell of hunker down meals. I think he's exploring things he's never had to try before. So but almost because he has more time and attention, and it feels like he's part of the world movement that's of changing tastes.
Wow. Well, okay, let's go ahead and close this because we got a lot of results on this poll. Look at that.
Yeah.
57% strongly agree that the current pandemic has impacted their brand loyalty. Well, this is just incredible and not surprising. That's exactly why we have you, Leslie, on the program today.
Great.
To share with us. Let's go back to the deck, please. Thank you. So,
all right. Thank you.
Leslie,
thank you.
I will hand this off to you and let us know if we can ask you questions while we go throughout.
Please jump in.
Okay.
I welcome
great.
them. I welcome questions. So,
excellent. Okay.
Yeah, we've been talking about we're going to talk about brand loyalty. So shopping has definitely changed. Supermarkets look completely different. We're going to talk a bit about that today. We're also going to talk about loyalty, and clearly that's why the question was there. How do you support your brands into the future? And as a bonus, we're going to add some information about the very, very current look at what's happening as states open and some information about race. So, CPG shopping in a time of COVID. The first things we did at NCS was actually decide that we needed to define time periods. Putting a name and a set of dates on time periods both gives us a way to talk about it and a way to track it and a deeper understanding. So we have the pre-period shopping that happened up until February 24th, and then that went to preparedness. So pre-shopping, just ordinary behavior. Then the word is going out into the world that this exists. You see a little bit of increase in shopping. March 11th, the news that the NBA was shutting down, and a few other major hurdles. By the end of that day, shopping had taken off, and we see it skyrocket on the 12th with extreme buying, and that lasted for about 10 days. After that, we've moved into what we're called home confined buying, and that's where we are now. And behavior is changing over this period, but much more gradually. So we'll dig into that end of that period a lot more at the very end, or some more at the very end. So how did America prepare? And during this preparedness phase, what we see is that hand sanitizer purchasing increased tremendously by 200%. Toilet paper is beginning to rise, and so you're seeing cleaning products and the things people are interested in. When we go into the extreme buying phase, it goes off the charts. Now what we're seeing here, 845% increase in toilet paper buying, bread increased, beer, basket size grew tremendously by 72%, and just lots and lots of products all over the place increasing. And there's lots of numbers on these charts. know that you can download them. I'm not going to talk through every single number, or we'd be here for way more than the time allotted. So
that's right. This will be available as a downloadable PDF.
I think it already is on your screen. So if you want to download it, go ahead. But you don't. I'm not going to talk through every number. I think that'll take us way too long.
Great.
So how are we shopping now? So as I showed, buying is still up by 30+%, but the kinds of things you're buying. So if you look at the rank of all the products and the kinds of categories, they're all roughly the same. There isn't dramatic shifts any longer. Now brands are changing, but the kinds of things you're buying aren't necessarily changing that dramatically. What's growing? Hand sanitizer, interesting cocktail mixes, baking is a big deal. Meat is a big deal, but meat mostly because of the meat packing plants.
Yeah.
So when we think about what's going on, we've seen lots of items, shelves are empty and things are out of stock, and that creates forced trial. So people are trying things they've never had to try before. We see increased basket size and lots of purchase cycle disruptions in addition to loyalty. So all of these things, it's like the bag of loyalty has been thrown up in the air, and everything's in a new place. And so this really caught our interest, and we decided to do a deep dive into the loyalty question.
But Leslie, wasn't that sort of at the peak of when the shelves are now replenished? I mean, you can find your stuff, or do you still find that is true, that people are forced to try new things?
Well, so in the home buying phase, for about 3/4 of it, we still had many shelves that were empty.
Wow.
Yeah. We actually measure how much of a shelf, how much is an item out of stock during a day. For instance, toilet paper forever looked like it was out of stock, but in fact it was in stock till about 9 o'clock in the morning. So
wow.
we could track that the things were in stock until they weren't in stock, and so we've had to include these variables in our models so that you can't say, did advertising increase sales if the item wasn't on the shelf. So we've added those kinds of variables into our models. Yeah. So, but loyalty. So all the way up till very recently, I think at this point the shelves are completely stocked. I haven't seen anything out of stock for a week or two, but it's recent.
Leslie, can I just jump in real quick with a question?
Sure.
Did you see any difference between private label and branded products?
Actually, branded products seem to have done very well during this period. Now, I think private label may have a resurgence with the recession. So it's, extreme buying was one period. Now we're moving into people being affected by income. So the things are going to change. This is not something that's going to stay the same. So we found this image on Reddit and Twitter, and we are a nation stuck at home consuming media, and certainly TV viewing has gone off the charts, and lots of things that have to do with entertainment. But I love Don Draper because his whole connection to advertising was this deep belief that the purpose of advertising is to connect a brand to the consumer, to create loyalty, to create that connection. And I think that is really what loyalty is all about. So it kind of fits really well together with what we've looked at. And so here's our study. I want to bring up one other thought around this changing brands. We've had advertisers come to us for years asking us to identify the key moments in somebody's life, when they have a child or they get married or they buy a home. That's when they buy lots of new products. That's when they try things. And people want to target that moment, But besides June weddings, there are not a lot of people, like the number of homes each that you can perfectly identify they're buying a home. and catch them right at that moment is really hard. But the entire world at this moment is undergoing a transformation and a life change. And so the entire world, the whole planet, is up for changing loyalty, changing behavior. And that sort of drives this research study. So what is this study? The study was, we had 16 advertisers. Each one was invited to supply 3 or 4 brands, a growing brand, a stable brand, a declining brand, and a few of them added a new brand introduction. And so together we had 50 brands, 16 advertisers, about 51 million homes of data that we're tracking for. We have 6 years of data. Mostly we're focusing on this year for this particular analysis, but a huge research study. So we did this study and came up with 5 key findings. And the first finding, oops, I'm going in the wrong direction. All right. The first key finding is that growing brands continue to grow. The higher the sales, the higher their growth in sales, during the extreme buying, they just go off the charts. So this is a pain reliever brand, and we're looking at brand dollar sales, and you can see 5 years, it's continually increasing. And then on the right, huge spike, off the charts buying. If we go under that chart and we look at what kind of loyalty there is, the purple is our loyal buyers, the red is switchers, the blue is non-loyal, the gray is non-brand buyers, and the green is non-category buyers. So you can see across time, this brand is growing. The levels of loyalty are growing. The levels across all the full spectrum. So let's zoom in to this right side of this chart and take a look. Now, unfortunately, all our nice builds had to be combined onto the slide, so I'll take you through it. On the left side, we see that in the pre-purchasing period, pre-COVID period, it's about 40% of the buying goes to the gray and the light green, the non-brand, non-category buyers. But then we get this big spike, and if we look at that spike, we see that we're up to about 60 to 65% of the buyers are coming from non-brand buyers. And then as we head out into the stay-at-home, home confined period, we see that the new brand buyers are coming back towards where they were before. So as you transition, you see that this brand, huge growth over the past several years, gets a huge boost in brand share across time. This second brand is a personal care product, and what we see here is this is a declining brand. So the category sales are in yellow, the brand sales are in purple, and you just see these spikes are holiday season. So the purple spike from one year to the next, you can see a lot lower buying. So they're doing less and less. The brand share goes across time, but the key to look at is the far right. We hit COVID and the brand share dropped. So yeah, the sales were up, but the share was down. So this brand is not getting the benefit of the increased buying that's happening in stores. When we look closely, what we see is that they're losing share. The brand loyals are where you're losing share in the post period. Those loyals are lower. They still are getting the same sort of quantity of non-brand buyers, but their loyal buyers are losing. And they've been losing loyal buyers all across this period. So, it's like more of the same. If you haven't been able to do a good job retaining or building this exacerbated it. Mm-hmm. So our third finding is that if you have a huge quantity of loyal buyers, they help stabilize your brand through this period. So this is a beer brand, a large beer brand, and there's a very strong summer pattern. That's the yellow category. Sales go up dramatically the couple key moments in the summer. That I'm sure those are big holidays. And the purple is the brand. So you can see that the brand, it goes up in the summer, but nowhere near as much. So the red is the share, and you see the share really dropping in the summer and coming back. And what happens when we hit this extreme buying period is leveling out. The sales stay strong. There's not a huge spike in buying, but they're also not losing buyers. And when we look at what happens with loyalty, we can see that since the majority of the buyers are these loyal buyers, yes, there's an uptick in extreme buying, but they're actually increased. The loyal buyers are buying a lot more during the home stay-at-home phase. So you see this higher level on the right. So
is that just pure stocking up?
No, this is probably higher consumption. Think it's beer.
Right.
People are drinking more when things get scary. This is what they do. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so the fourth is all about comfort. We know that in extreme periods like this, people are looking for stability. They're looking for comfort. Comfort can come from a bunch of different places. It might be what you grew up with. It might be a premium brand. In this case, we're not talking about a premium brand. We're talking about a comfort brand. But we also see this true in premium brands. It's simple ways to treat yourself. You know, these are low-cost ways of giving yourself a pat on the back, a boost in scary times. So this is a prepared meal, box prepared dinner. It's a flagship brand. You know, sort of going along, not a whole lot of, you know, it's a big definer of the category. We hit the extreme buying, it comes off the chart. And the key to see is this red line brand share, whoa, it really starts taking off, right? So it has a huge boost out of this COVID period. And when we look at it, you can see that the loyal buyers come back hugely and buy lots, and then in the post period, while you're seeing the loyal be higher, but all the other buckets are equally, they're growing. So this is done really, you know, comfort brands did very, very well during this stay-at-home period. And last is we have to talk about advertising. We know that advertising works. So for this is a beverage. We took all their they had an advertising campaign from sort of November of 2019 through right till March, and we're looking at who was exposed during that campaign versus who was not. So exposed is blue. We look back a year in the pre-period, and we say, oh, what kind of consumers were exposed? And we see that both the exposed and the unexposed both had roughly a brand share of about 0.4%. So this is a small brand, right? 0.4. That's not 40, it's 0.4. And then you see during the campaign period, it's higher than the people who are exposed are higher. But then when we go to the post-campaign period during the rest of this stay-at-home period, we see that the brand is having higher sales, and the exposed maintain the higher sales over the not exposed, but the sales are going down. Like advertising, when it stops being out there, it stops working, right? So now let's take these exposed buyers.
Before you get into that, just a quick question on that, because I think some brands are struggling with what the message should be during the COVID time, yes. Right? And especially, you know, I was reading an ad age that like 90% of youth, of millennials, Gen X, Gen Zers want that the advertising message acknowledge the difficulty of COVID.
So I think
are you seeing that
across time? We just finished a study that looked at through the end of April, and we saw that they had 2 ads running, and we looked at the effect of the 2 ads, and the new ad was one that was directed towards COVID, and that did 50% better than the other one. So, yeah,
Really?
I mean, they both did well, but adding in the message that resonated did very well. I'm not sure today whether we're not a little tired of hearing that message. But
Yeah.
so you need to have a nod, but not a like drive people crazy with it. You know, there's a balance that takes place across time.
We're all in this together moment, and now it's like, let's move on.
Yeah, and what do you do about it, right? It's okay to say we're in this together, but it needs to have more than just that, I think.
Yeah.
So we've taken this blue group, the exposed, and we ran a sales effect, and we said, among those that were exposed, who responded? And that's this next slide. So the purple line is who responded. Down below is the red and blue. So you can see the axis really changed. And now, of the people who responded before the advertising, they had a 4 share. So these people were 10 times as likely to buy the brand on average. So not everybody was 10 times more likely, but a lot of these people were heavy brand buyers. You know, they're substantial. On average, they had a very high brand share. We hit the campaign period, and the purchasing roughly doubled. I think that's a build. Yep, we kept the build. But I think that's because it's the second slide. So this boost, the height of the boost is due to the creative. Who responds is it's related to the targeting, but there's also a big piece of how big this is. If you had 5 examples, the difference between them is going to be the quality of the creative. But if you look, big lift, they go off the air, and you see the sales go back down. They're still high. They're still going strong. But it really does matter if you're on the air or you're not, and whether you're able to capitalize on what's happening. So creative really does drive advertising response, and advertising does matter. So if we think about what are the keys you want to think about, you know, give your loyal buyers some love, pay attention to them. Don't only focus on the people who don't buy your brand. Make sure you're also messaging the people who do. In this time when you've got new triers, work to convert them, but also go back and talk to the people who've tried a different brand. So if you're a market leader, make sure you've shored up the loyalty among your existing buyers. We think emphasizing comfort, and in whether it's premium or from home or however you're doing it, emphasizing comfort is important. And certainly continue marketing. It's a huge opportunity with all the kind of loyalty shuffling that's happening. Now's the time that you can really capture much more of that of the market share. So I've got these couple bonus slides here. One is to look at states that opened and states that aren't or are on their way. So what we did was divide the pattern of buying. Now this is average household spend among spending households, right? So it's per spending household. So what happened week by week? We divided them into 5 groups based on grouping what state these homes were in with what kind of pattern of opening and closing. So at the top, the most open states, Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma, etc. These are the states that have been most open. And on the bottom of the scale is California, New York. These are states that were early to close and have stayed closed the longest. And I expected the shape of these to be different. Now it's interesting that the height is different, but I don't actually think that that's probably wealth and, it might be other things. But I don't think that it's interesting. What's most interesting to me is that Florida is on the bottom, the purple, and that shape of that line looks very much like the one on the top, the orange, right? Like the shape of these is not really different. So that says to me that it almost doesn't matter what the government says about opening and closing. What's more important is your own feeling and whether you're going to go shop. And this is related to supermarket buying, right? So the level of the amount of buying you're doing, if you've been doing takeout in restaurants, you're probably continuing to do takeout in restaurants. You know, things aren't dramatically changing. There is a slight decline. You can see there is a decline from the peak of when people realized they really were going to be home. That's slowly declining, but it's not really dramatic. So.
And Leslie, what's that sharp decline?
At
the end of March.
Okay, so the first thing is this extreme buying happened, and I think that for a moment you stopped and you said, what's going on here? And people had bought so much they didn't quite need it the next week, right? So like they expected to be home for several weeks, and then buying sort of smooths out. In the middle of April, we did have Easter, but this is weekly data, so you don't actually see that here. You'll see it on in some of the daily data, but not in the weekly data. So we thought, what if it's not about states? Is it about rural? Is it about urban? Is it about what are the things that are different? And we looked at lots of cases, and actually, it doesn't look like rural and suburbs and urban or inner city made a difference. But what did make a difference was race. So one of the ways we collected things was by geo-cluster. We have 23, we take census data and we group census clusters, census tracts into clusters based on all kinds of buying criteria. And race is a piece of it, but it's not the whole piece. It also includes urban, it includes number of children, presence of household size, etc. But we decided if we just combine them by race, so this isn't the race of the household, it's the race mix of the neighborhood, okay? You have to think it's neighborhoods.
Census blocks, yes.
Right,
yes.
So we're talking about neighborhoods. And we've created 5 of them. So we have Asian, Black, Hispanic, mixed neighborhoods, and white. And certainly white is at the top, Black is at the bottom. That would indicate to me that it has an awful lot. The height of these bars, how much you're spending, is really related to income. I mean, that's like, of course. But what's more interesting to me is that this white line probably is even a sharper decline over time than we're showing with the green line. The green line is sort of an arrow to give you a sense. It's declining across time, and we saw that in the state data. But if you look at Black and Hispanic, Black being orange and Hispanic being red, those levels of buying have remained constant. And I think that's because these are where the essential workers come from. They're the people who are facing fear every day. They don't think we're out of the woods. They can't afford the luxury of relaxing in this time period. They are still buying at a much higher level than they did before the pandemic hit. And I think that so this seems like a very interesting divergence in terms of what's happening in the world, that we really have neighborhoods changing.
But Leslie and Jake, I mean, this goes to you too. Yeah. Isn't some of this cultural? I mean, Latinos cook every day. A lot of them cook from scratch, I would say. So do African Americans. Could this be a little bit cultural as well?
It might be, but if you look at the pre-pandemic level of buying, they're almost, they've gone up quite a bit. It's not a double because the axis isn't from 0; it starts at 70. They've gone from $75 to $90 if you're Black, $77 to $110 if you're Hispanic. That's right. There's a difference, right? But I think that the fact that they're not resolving back to a lower level as states have opened up. As people have decided we're sort of out of this. They're less willing to take that chance. That's my guess. We're looking at behavior and trying to imagine why. So I'm making up the why. I'm telling a story around the why, but I don't know for a fact, right? I'm not doing surveys.
So Leslie, I was just going to jump in here, and I think that this slide here is also very representative of the overall, commerce. So, putting COVID-19 aside, you need, whites are they make the share, they drive growth, right, from a share standpoint, the volume, and that's declining. And then the importance of the multicultural consumer is in driving growth. Right. So like it's almost like you need both. You need everyone, as a brand to grow in this sort of weird world where your biggest growth customer is declining, and then the smaller groups individually and collectively are growing the business. And so pre-COVID, post-COVID, I think there's a pattern here that I've seen also.
Yep.
Okay. I know you have a few more slides, so we don't want to stop you too much. Go ahead.
This is the end. It's time for us to have go deeper.
Conversation. I know, Jake, you had a couple questions.
I do, and I think, Leslie, I think that the data you're presenting to us today is fantastic, and the work you've done for, as long as you've been at NCS is telling, and you've been a leader at Nielsen Catalina and everywhere else you've been in. So I'm more interested in understanding the why, because the data is the data, right? And so, the important trends that you've talked about today, the big brands, the brands that are doing well continue to do well. And the brands that are, maybe a little bit challenged continue to be challenged, right, during these periods. And so going back to the sort of the theme of this thing, brand loyalty matters, right? Like invest in the ones that are driving your business. So my question to you is, why do we see these patterns? Why do you think these patterns are emerging more clearly now? Is it that we're just kind of looking at them because of COVID, or?
No, we've been looking at loyalty now. I think there was a great deal of emphasis on loyalty maybe 10 years ago, or 15 or 20 years ago, but NCS has been looking at loyalty now for about 4 years as a key component. So I don't think it's just that we're looking at it now. I think what's happening is brands have been trying to figure out how to grow. How do you grow your brand, right? Some have approached it by saying you're only going to get billed through penetration. I got to focus on the non-brand buyer. I have to focus on the non-consumer. And others have focused on their consumers. And so to the degree that the loyalty is really tight and been built up by advertising across many, many years. So the more that advertising can build that connection to the consumer, when it comes to an emergency, think about a pain reliever. You know intellectually that the ingredients in that pain reliever is the same as a private label. But you're
yeah,
right? Am I going to save a $1 on what, and I think that's little bits of money that we see in supermarkets. You go for comfort, you go for security, you go for safety, you go for something something you believe in. And I think that the equity message that's been out there are many people who believe that who feel good about those products, but maybe they don't want to spend the money on them. But when the emergency happens, they do.
And Leslie, this also speaks to the brand purpose. Like I think, there are these waves in advertising and marketing where like brand purpose comes into play, or sustainability becomes a big term or concept. But you're really touching on, like, these brands need to represent something much more than just their product, but their brand value proposition. Yeah. And so I love that message. I love the message that advertising works, marketing continues to work. It's the basic foundational sort of tactics, the blocks and tackling of marketing continues to work to prove itself actually through the good and the bad. Right, so I think that's the message that I'm taking away with. The thing that I love about this presentation, to me, is the way that you look at sales. You're looking at it now not so much by demographics or psychographics, although I think your models incorporate those too, but I think you're looking at this thing from a purchasing volume perspective. And I just wanted to kind of talk to you about it as a thought leader, right? Like, the markets get stuck in these sort of silos. It's demographics, psychographics, now it's behavior. What is, as a CRO of Nielsen Catalina, like, what is next in your head? And how long are you going to underscore this, purchase-based segmentation?
So it's very important that you target, but not teeny targets. Like, it's ridiculous to target these. Reach matters, and so if you have a very tiny target, your reach is going to be infinitesimal. And if your reach is infinitesimal, only the people who see your ad can respond. So your response is going to be infinitesimal. I mean, they all go together, right? So I think that if you have creative that brings in new buyers, target people who are not buying. But if your creative is really only bringing in people who are loyal, and it's building loyalty, then those are the people you should be advertising to, with maybe a little bit of fuzz around the edges, like the people who are likely to be, the people you want to build more loyalty to. So yeah, maybe send it to just brand buyers, right? Mm-hmm. Build your brand. But connecting that, it's all the foundational pieces. It isn't like you can all just do one little piece or another little piece. You have to have the creative that works, you target, you have to have reach. Like, these are foundational media concepts, and we think, oh, we're in a whole new age. We aren't. We're really still doing advertising,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing from you saying is that it's not these individual silos. It's like, you've got to just kind of create this horizontal approach that incorporates everything, right? So yes, there is this next big thing over here. Maybe it's data science and it's analytics and all this shiny object over here, but the basics still, are very fundamental to your growth. So, but also speaking about growth, I think this is the last question before we turn it over to Chiki and the questions that we have from the audience.
We're getting quite a few, yeah.
Right. The multicultural piece, I think, is a really important one, right? Because I think that's where more and more of companies are seeing their growth. And fundamentally, multicultural is changing the new mainstream. It's changing the mainstream city by city, right? As we're seeing today, in 20 years, we're expecting to see this sort of national tipping point where 51% will be multicultural. So, any thoughts about just from a Nielsen Catalina perspective, how much of your research, your sampling, your methodology, all that kind of stuff is going to sort of gravitate and elevate multicultural?
So the way you match purchases and exposures for all attribution really rest on the matching services, the experience, the axioms, all of those device matches. And those don't do a great job with race. It's why we bring in census to ground ourselves in the right sizing of things. I think projecting your sample properly to each race is really important. that you just don't want to be, if you can, to do your best to project so that you're properly measuring when, if you have a frequent shopper panel, our data is many stores. The immigrant population is probably less likely to have that frequent shopper card than a person that's, doesn't worry about those things. And so doing a good job of weighting is really important. But once you've done all that, it's also fascinating to me that advertising tends to work dramatically harder against the less assimilated population. So when you advertise, you get a much larger boost from the multicultural. Any kind of advertising drives higher lift among the multicultural because they see advertising as a clue as to how to be part of our culture.
Yeah, fascinating. And we have some questions from the audience that I want to get in there, and I saw you. Jake, I don't know, did you want to do a quick follow-up to that?
I just want to take the conversation to the next level if I can on multicultural because we're talking about brand loyalty, right? And if you're targeting brand loyal consumers, those brand loyal consumers behave the same. And so even though there are differences between ethnicity and race, if brands are targeting and driving, cultivating these, brand loyal consumers, it's incidental, right? Race and ethnicity is incidental to brand loyalty because they're buying 5 of those things, every 3 days. And so you can target across ethnicity and race by grabbing all of them, by targeting them or segmenting them by behavior. Anyway, that's sort of like, this is the conversation that I saw in your deck today, looking at it horizontally versus vertically. Anyway, I know we've got a ton of questions, and Leslie and I are talking.
Hold on a sec. So, from Patrick Harrington, what reasons do you think make for such a big decline in the Asian household segment grocery buying? It seems that they're quite close to their pre-COVID-19 expenditures seen in February. I don't know if you want to put up that chart.
I don't think they're there yet. I think they're on their way, and they may not be experiencing the same level of pandemic that the rest of the population is. I'm not sure. The interesting thing was Native Americans also had a similar pattern, and I know they are seeing we included the Native American into the mixed neighborhoods because it's a tiny little group. It's so small, but so it bounced around a lot. But I wouldn't say that the Asians are back to where they were pre-COVID, but I think maybe their shopping behavior is in a more I can't.
That's okay.
That's what
you can't have answers to everything. My leader from Consumer Dynamics Institute, John Forsythe, who's watching, thank you, John.
Love John. Good friend.
Sends a question. How much of this is how we shop? How much of this is how we shop is different? What is the effect of shopper objective to get in and out of the store as quickly as possible? That would support loyal brand.
I agree. I think that when you hit the shelf, you do not have the time to go read the labels on the back and see if the ingredient list is the same. You know the brands that you like. If they're there, you take them. If they're not there, you take the one that's next to it and keep going. Right? I think that is certainly an element in loyalty. But we are also seeing that people are going to fewer stores. So the baskets are bigger, and actually we are seeing it's easier for us to tell what a shopper's full picture of buying is because we think when we see it we're getting all of it. It's a kind of interesting, we have many stores, and in some areas we have multiple stores, and we can see the distribution of buying across stores, and people are going to you go to one store when you shop. You're not shopping at many stores.
But but are you guys tracking online shopping as well? We got a brilliant question. I'm not sure.
We do have online shopping, but not large enough to break out as a separate piece. And we're not tracking the biggest shopping, online shopping things of Amazon and those the biggest shopping. We're not. We have some online shopping, and many of the supermarkets also have online shopping that we collect.
So the question here from an audience member is, does the increased weekly spend on groceries have anything to do with the shift to people using delivery services such as Instacart?
I think what's interesting is I think that probably what we're seeing is only a fraction of the increase in shopping.
Interesting.
When we look at, I think we're seeing this huge increase, but we're also seeing it in other places, right? Like when I look at RMS, Nielsen's Retail Market Service, which does all stores where we only have our, frequent shopper panel, we see much higher, the kinds of shopping is smoothing out in ways that ours isn't, right? So I think there is a lot of behavior going online. But we're still seeing, surprisingly, an awful lot of shopping in our stores.
Huh. Okay.
And then these charts are household. What's the spend per household of a buying household? So there are households that are not buying, and they are not part of those curves, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's among buying households. So many people have stopped buying. We still see that sales are higher, but in terms of which group we were looking at among buying households.
And so this pertains to the other question we got from my senior researcher, actually. Could it be that some of the higher grocery spend by some segments is due to people trying to save money by cooking at home rather than eating out, even if food services have reopened?
It could be. It could very much be that a new normal includes many more people cooking at home. That could, I know people who never have baked, never have cooked, and are surprised that they are enjoying it so much. I think the world, it opened a lot of windows for people and new views and opened doors and gave them new views of how to be. So, it's just fascinating. And that's not really in our data, but I think that it's certainly a possibility.
I mean, I know I baked bread for the first time in my life, and I'm a cook. I love to cook, but I was forced to bake bread because I couldn't find a good baguette in my neighborhood, right? Yeah.
And I have always baked bread, and I couldn't find yeast to save my life.
Yeah, it was really hard to find yeast.
It completely disappeared, but yeah.
So, well, we're coming close to the end here. I know. Hold on. We have one more question that just came in from Jocelyn Vaught.
Yes.
If race and ethnicity are incidental to brand loyalty, what are the primary factors?
Well, I don't know that race and ethnicity are incidental.
So I created that hornet's nest, right? I mean, I kind of...
You did sort of mention that. Yeah.
Incidental. So let me clarify that, because incidental meaning that it's not... So there's brand loyalty, and there's reasons why people are brand loyal, right? So like if you look at the brand loyal segment, they can all be sort of segmented based on what they need, based on what they want. Right? So there's a reason why they buy 5 cartons of milk a week, or they buy, this brand specifically. So the usage, the requirement to buy that product fulfills some kind of emotional, some kind of need state that is beyond race and ethnicity. In other words, we can see white, African American, Latinos all being brand loyal for this one product for that same reason. Right? You can start looking at differences. But if you're looking at brand loyalty, there's got to be a commonality as to why they are all brand loyal despite their ethnic and racial differences.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying,
some products hook onto an ethnicity. you know, Corona beer, Bustelo coffee. You know, they're connected to an ethnicity. There's,
but I'm sorry. I think more whites drink Corona beer than Latinos.
That is absolutely true. But they've got the hook, and when you see what the response of advertising is, the response from people who are loyal is tremendously higher for those kinds of products when you're against the loyal message, when they've got that ethnicity as part of it, because people have attached the ethnicity as part of the unique selling proposition. The user may or may not be that ethnicity, but they are part of buying that product is connected to the ethnicity. Absolutely. We see that when ethnicity is part of a brand, their messages tend to include that, and that's a very strong creative hook that makes the response, you know, the pattern of response exponentially higher rather than just linearly higher.
Jake, you're shaking your head. Please, what you want to add to that a little bit?
No, I think she's spot on. I think the other part of brand loyalty, and Leslie, you know, jump in here on this, but I think that we've got to look at brand loyalty drivers by category, because you know, to kind of put them all together in this whole soup of brand loyalty does a disservice for different brands in different categories, because consumers are buying different brands for different reasons, and the drivers have to be different. So this is fantastic work. I mean, this is where, you know, you open this Pandora's box, and there's so much that we can continue to research and explore.
And we will, but we're going to have to do it at the next one. But Jake, I know you're working on a new book called The Big Shift, which is due out in September.
So, you know,
what can you tell us about your new book?
I've been writing this book for about 18 months, and it's coming to fruition. You know, we're planning to publish it and make it available sometime in the middle of September. You know, I wouldn't be talking about the big shift if I didn't feel or believe that companies needed to make the big shift. And the reason for that is that, you know, there's a demographic sort of tsunami, a big, you know, sort of change in these markets where companies need to grow with the multicultural consumer, which I believe and many people believe are the new mainstream. So we need to kind of redefine or, you know, look at marketing a little differently, much like companies did with the millennials, right? That was like a head scratcher, right? Like they're like, what? They're not traditional, you know, shoppers, and a lot of companies struggled with them. And so I think that as we look at the 21st century, growth, much like Leslie's slide here towards the back end of our presentation, you know, are going to offset the decline of the white population with growth in the cities that matter most for brands. And so the whole big shift is there's a shift in the demography, therefore there has to be a shift in how marketing is developed and executed in corporate America.
Well, great. Thank you, Jake. I hope you'll come back and tell us a lot more about the big shift when you're ready. Looks like you're saying in September.
Yep.
And with that, I want to thank you both, Leslie and Jake, for sharing your knowledge with us today. And to you all, the dear participants out there, for tuning in. Next week, don't forget that next week, Jake and I will be interviewing the CEO of Clorox, Benno Dorer, and how his house of brands is on fire. And we mean that in the best way possible. Our fireside chat with Benno is next Wednesday, June 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So sign up if you haven't already. This is open to the public, and we hope everybody can listen to what an amazing leader he is and what he's doing with a 107-year-old company and brands that are a must-have. So again, thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed this webinar, please tell all your colleagues and peers about it. And remember to subscribe to our podcast and explore our entire catalog of offerings at the Conference Board by visiting our website at www.conference-board.org. Thank you, everybody.
Jake, thank you so much for inviting us. We really appreciated being here.
Thanks, Leslie.
Yeah.
It was